Yes, they did have the courage to let me come back up here and address you all once again. But I just have some really quick announcements here that I want to go through. To remind everyone, there are chapter meetings tonight starting at 6 o'clock. The Watoa folks will be meeting at Emerald's at Universal City Walk. Please meet at the Water Hotel Ferry at 5:45. Oatoa will meet in Venetian rooms 1 and 2. Tatoa will meet in Venetian 3. And Kapatoa will, big surprise, meet at a bar. The Thirsty Fish here at the Lowe's Portofino Resort. We will be drawing our passport winner at the end of today's luncheon. Make sure that you have turned in your completed form either to Jen Harmon or to Tanya Rideout. It's your chance to win a complimentary conference registration to our 2014 conference in St. Paul. You must be present to win. They made sure I said that. Also, tomorrow morning we are having a series of roundtables starting at 9 o'clock. Policy topics in Venetian Room 3 include advanced discussion on local franchising, successes and hot topics, advanced discussions on nuances of state franchising, status reports and action plans, and technology and apps. Programming topics in Venetian 1 and 2 include evolving youth and government access, mobile applications for your channel, and low-cost or no-cost ways to market your channel. And I know none of you listen to any of that, so make sure you ask us tomorrow morning and we'll direct you to the right rooms. Also, tomorrow, we will be showing the Austin Channel documentary, Access This, from 8 to 9:10 in Venetian 4 and 5. Come and have breakfast and watch this great documentary on the 40th anniversary of the longest continually running PEG channel in the country. And with that, I will hand it over to Catherine Rice.
Hello, everyone. My name is Catherine Rice, and I'm the president of the Southeastern chapter of NATOA, which is North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee. And for all of you guys, we're going to meet Kapatoa in the Thirsty Fish for our chapter meeting too, okay? They're the best partiers, I've heard. Anyway, I have the great pleasure today of presenting the NATOA Member of the Year Award for 2013. The Member of the Year is selected yearly based on exemplary contributions to the association within the last year and cumulatively on issues of importance to NATOA and local governments. And I am personally thrilled to present this award because I watched this very talented team of people step up to the plate not 1 year, but 2 years to preserve local community authority to determine their own economic future. As you all know, in 2011, after a 4-year battle, the incumbents in the state of North Carolina successfully pushed through a bill into law which effectively prohibits our local communities from providing broadband service to their residents and businesses. That had the effect of prohibiting our 1 gigabit city, Wilson, North Carolina, from reaching out and providing gigabit service to our rural communities like Pine Tops and our urban communities like the city of Raleigh even. So the next year in 2012, with victory in hand, AT&T took that bill down to this state, and this amazing group of people prevented that bill from becoming a law. It never even got out of committee. They were able to flip it to a study bill. The next year, this year, AT&T raised that bill up again, tried again, got it all the way to the House floor, where this amazing group of people not only stopped the bill, but historically garnered bipartisan support under the terms of local control and rural economic development, and that bill was rejected on the House floor. This year, NATOA's Member of the Year goes to Georgia Municipal League, and I have Marcia Rubinson here to accept the award.
I'm very honored and flattered to be accepting this award on behalf of the Georgia Municipal Association. I'm most appreciative of the support and information and assistance that we got from NATOA, from Catherine Etzetoa, from Christopher Mitchell, from Jim Baller, and so many others who are active in the municipal public broadband community. Of course, an effort like this by GMA can never be successful without the support of and the active engagement of our mayors in the state. And I was so proud of our mayors that only 11 of them would have been directly affected by the legislation. And then, in fact, they were grandfathered out of the bill, so they would not have been affected by the legislation. But still, all of those mayors and all of the mayors who didn't have systems came together, rose up, and demanded and framed this as a local control issue. And we anticipate this bill will be back, but we're primed and ready to go, and I look forward to working with all of you to keep public broadband opportunities available in Georgia and working with you in your states to make sure that public broadband is preserved across the country. Thank you.
Tony and I now have the pleasure of presenting the NATOA Community Broadband Awards for 2013. With the Member of the Year award, the particular awardee this year, it seems very appropriate and very consistent. Let me just start with a minute and then I'll hand it over to Tony. The NATOA board created the Community Broadband Awards about 7 years ago in order to try to provide overdue recognition to the individuals, communities, organizations that have worked so hard in such a thankless environment and against such extraordinary barriers to promote community broadband and community decision-making around broadband and new opportunities for communities throughout the country. And the idea was to honor truly outstanding individuals, projects, and local governments who have managed to improve and expand local options around broadband. There are so many of these throughout the United States, but each year we select a few that truly stand out in a number of different categories. And these are people doing tremendous work on the local level that has impact throughout the country for all our communities because of the battles they fight, the precedents they set, and the examples and data that they provide for other communities to adopt going forward. Let me hand it to Tony to make the awards.
Thanks, Joanne. This is one of my favorite parts of the conference. So the 2013 Community Broadband recipients are, first off, for pioneering efforts to develop and sustain broadband adoption programs that enable digital literacy and bring the benefits of technology and broadband to citizens of Boston who have not before found the technology accessible. This year's Community Broadband Hero is Deb Sosha from the City of Boston.
Thank you so much. This is an unexpected honor, and I'm truly grateful for the opportunity. I run a program in Boston called Tech Goes Home and another project called Connecting Boston to erase the disparity that exists in access in the city. We literally have a goal of having 100% of our citizenry connected. I'm really lucky to work with a mayor who so believes in this. Mayor Menino has been a great advocate, and our CIO, Bill Oates, has been amazing. And of course, Mike Lynch and many, many other partners who have all come together to make this happen. And the city as a whole has benefited greatly. One of our big goals is to ensure that we have equitable inputs in order to get equitable outcomes. We look at children who have access, who have the same motivation and commitment as children who do not have access, and how do we help those children have the same outcomes? The only way is if we have the same input. Everybody needs access, and so that has been our goal. And I appreciate the focus on this issue by NATOA. It's really helpful to those in the community to hear all of the advocacy. I worried so much about the opportunities that maybe you were going to lose in North Carolina and Georgia, and certainly am so pleased that you were able to overcome that. And it's because of organizations like this and because of the partnerships we form that we're actually able to make those changes. And so I thank you very much for this honor. I am truly humbled. Thank you.
Next, we have for an award for developing a vision and business plan to expand world-class broadband infrastructure to each home in the city and thereby secure the city's economic future. This year's Community Broadband Fiber Network of the Year is the city of Longmont, Colorado, and we're extremely fortunate given some of the severe weather conditions in that area of the country and in his hometown. Please join me in thanking Vince Jordan, Broadband Services Manager for Longmont Power and Communications.
I got to tell you, it's a little surreal standing here in front of you at the moment. A week ago today, our town started to go underwater, and 2 days later we were declared a national disaster area by President Obama. We evacuated 7,000 homes and are just now recovering from that. I wasn't planning on being out here. My boss said, "This is really important. Get on a plane, go out, turn around, come back. We'll get back to work." We were really surprised when we got nominated for this award. I had no idea it was going to happen. Thank you, Tony. That was great. Longmont put its fiber network in 1997 and had a vision all the way back then to do a fiber to the home, fiber to the business community. Like a lot of states, we ended up getting blocked by a state law. But in our state, you're able to overcome that by a municipal vote, which we did in 2011. In 2012, we started putting electronics and equipment in place. We had a lot of support from different people around the country. I want to especially thank Chris Mitchell for his continued support for Longmont, and Craig Settles is around here someplace. And thank you, Craig. Appreciate that as well. This year, we started rolling out service to businesses and residents, and just recently announced gigabit service to our residents for $49.95 a month. So I challenge all you municipalities out there doing this. So today, we're getting ready to rebuild our community. This flood was really very devastating and had a huge impact on the community. And we're not just going to rebuild it, but we're going to build it better. Hopefully within a few years, we will have fiber passing every single home and every single business in Longmont and really be the future for gigabit connectivity in the Front Range area of Colorado. So thank you so much again for this honor. It's very humbling, and we really appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay. Next, for extending broadband to some of the most remote areas of Alaska and providing affordable service to some of the state's least served regions and citizens, this year's Community Broadband Wireless Network of the Year is the Terra Network. Accepting the award is John Barnhart, Director of Network Strategy for GCI.
Thank you very much. On behalf of GCI, UUI, our two fabulous project managers, Chuck Russell and Rebecca Markley, and the hundreds of people who've worked tirelessly over the past 4 years to make this network a reality, I'd like to thank NATOA for awarding us the Community Broadband Wireless Network of the Year Award. It was a very challenging project. We're dealing with conditions that most people don't have to deal with. This involved permitting across vast stretches of wilderness. It involved construction of microwave repeaters that have to power themselves for a year at a time on remote mountaintops. It involved laying fiber in frozen tundra, under frozen riverbeds, and across vast lake beds. But we got it done, and the bottom line is that today, 67 communities and 50,000 people in western Alaska have access to broadband internet service, critical distance education and telemedicine services, and economic opportunity that they did not have before. So it's a real honor to be here. I would also like to thank the Rural Utilities Service of the Department of Agriculture, who helped provide financing for this through the Broadband Initiatives Program that was part of the Recovery Act, as well as the Regulatory Commission of Alaska, who also supported the project. Thank you very much. It's a real honor to receive this recognition.
Okay. For its 20 years of effort in helping develop networks and communications infrastructure in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, Latin America, the Caribbean, and the Middle East, this year's Community Broadband Organization of the Year is the Network Startup Resource Center in Oregon. Accepting on behalf of the organization is Milo Meacham, Program Manager, Lane County Council of Governments in Oregon. Milo?
Thank you. It's an honor to be here and get a little of the glory for the NSRC. They work around the world bringing network startup resources to places like Myanmar and Zimbabwe and Nigeria. If you can name a remote third world country, they've probably been there. What I like to think of them doing is essentially bringing the 21st century to the third world. The important thing that they do, though, is that they do a lot of work in the United States with internet service providers, with different companies, the institutions, especially the universities on things like the Internet 3, developing programs that help everybody in the world, really, including people in the United States, get better broadband access. So it's an honor for me. I wish that they could have been here, but unfortunately, they already had commitments. One of them is in a meeting, I believe, with Google, and the other leader is in Burma right now. So I'm here in their stead, and I want to thank you very much for this honor. And I know that they appreciate the recognition that you gave them for the work that they do. Thank you.
We have one more Community Broadband Award winner that we'll be accepting via Skype, and we'll announce the winner at the conclusion of today's luncheon. So enjoy your lunch.
And while you're enjoying your lunch, I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker. And then he'll come up and speak, and when he's done, we will go right into a panel discussion, and you'll all have opportunities to ask questions during the course of that conversation. So our keynote speaker today is no stranger to our community. He's spoken to us in the past, and we're very happy to welcome back Milo Medin, who is the Vice President of Access Services at Google, where he oversees the company's Gigabit Fiber to the Home project and other efforts to improve access to the internet. Prior to joining Google in 2010, Milo was founder and CTO of M2Z Networks, which was a company that sought to deploy a nationwide wireless broadband network system that would have expanded consumer access and was also focused on bridging the digital divide. Before that, Milo was co-founder and chief technology officer of Excite at Home, an organization that this community knew well and saw pretty extensively in the early days of the cable modem platform, where he led the development of the company's national infrastructure and helped deliver the first large-scale residential broadband access service in partnership with major cable operators. And earlier, Milo worked at NASA's Ames Research Center, where he managed the primary West Coast interconnect for the internet and architected and managed the global NASA Science Internet. And this is not written on the official bio, but I'll say that in those early days at NASA, Milo was there in some of the early birth years of the commercial and non-commercial internet. He was one of the people who drove the early birth of broadband through the cable modem platform, where Around my office, he's still known as the father of the cable modem. And now at Google, he is one of the people who is helping to drive the country, we hope, to bigger services, a new broadband era in a gigabit world. So please join me in welcoming Milo Medin.
I guess that's what it means to be typecast. Thank you. Thank you, Joanne, for the introduction. It's great to be here, not just because I get to see many of my friends here, but because increasingly this is where the action is. Across the U.S., cities and states are realizing that the landscape of American broadband is going to change. It's going to have to change as a result of actions that cities and states take. It's not going to come from Washington. It's going to come from Main Street. Over the last decade, policy initiatives and regulatory authority for wireline networks have really shifted from cities and states to Washington. And coupled with the increasing importance of mobile networks, which have always been regulated through the spectrum authority the FCC has had, the locus of decision-making and network policy has really become concentrated in D.C. While this is appropriate in many ways, it is also part of the reason that the U.S. is falling behind other nations in broadband. Much of the Washington establishment has become a cheerleader, touting about how great things are, rather than looking at the facts and taking actions based on data. And I don't think the data is that confusing. If you look at the latest data collected by the OECD, 34 leading industrialized nations, the U.S. ranks 16th in terms of advertised access speeds. And we pay more on a dollar per megabit basis than all but 5 other countries: Israel, New Zealand, Chile, Greece, and Mexico. Cost is a big deal because even if, as some argue, if 100 megabit service is widely available in the U.S. today, if it's priced too high, very few people will be able to afford it. And if no one subscribes to a service because of its cost, what's the point of offering it in the first place? It's not a technology problem. We in the engineering community keep developing new solutions that allow more and more capacity to be delivered over fiber at declining cost. With every new generation of equipment deployed on existing fiber systems, unit costs continue to decline. And this is how the internet has managed to grow at 40 or 45% compounded annually over more than a decade without having massive cost increases. Moving bits at scale is amazingly cheap. Many people believe that bandwidth somehow is expensive. It really isn't. As with most problems where high prices and lack of innovation are issues, the central problem is a lack of competition. After all, why should a company offer higher speeds at lower prices if no one else is offering a better value to consumers? We understand that in response to us deploying gigabit fiber in Provo, Utah, next month, Comcast has started to offer a 250 megabit down, 50 megabit reverse service for $70 a month, and a triple play bundle, including a 105 megabit broadband tier for $120 a month. If any of you in your communities have this kind of offer from a cable operator, could you raise your hands? I didn't think so. We have gotten so used to lack of real competition that we are downright surprised at what happens when competition suddenly shows up. And it's been a long time since we saw a real disruption in speed and pricing. It's been more than a decade and a half since the company that I helped found started deploying cable modem services that provided 4 or 5 megabits of speed for about $40 a month. At the time, it was 100 times faster than the dial-up infrastructure that had obsoleted. When we started deploying fiber in Kansas City, the cable operator there was charging $45 a month for 10 whole megabits a second. That's not a lot of progress for 15 years. And while the folks in Provo will get to enjoy Google Fiber's gigabit service and a faster and much higher value cable offering, what about the rest of the U.S.? Don't expect Washington to step in and fix the problem for you. When was the last time you heard the FCC talk about the lack of competition in wireline broadband and the desperate need to create more of it? Of course, we at Google know how good or bad broadband services is across the world. Our business, like almost all technology companies' businesses, depends on having a fast and open infrastructure where users can get to our products. And that's part of the reason Google started the fiber program. Initially, it started as an experiment. No one at the beginning at Google thought of this as a real business for us to get into. You changed our minds. Yes, all of you that responded to our initial fiber RFP. When 1,100 cities came back telling us all the amazing things you would do to get gigabit fiber deployed in your communities, we realized just how much demand there was for a new choice. Google Fiber is actually your fault. You showed us that there was clear demand for gigabit internet. So we responded with our first build in Kansas City. And we've actually been very surprised at what's happened there. A whole startup village has taken root in the first fiber hood we deployed in Hanover Heights. Entrepreneurs from all over the region and other parts of the country moved in, renting rooms, and are developing new services and businesses with the gigabit infrastructure that we provide. Even more surprising to us was Fitch. Yes, Fitch, the credit rating agency. When do you ever hear about credit rating agencies in telecom discussions? Earlier this year, they upgraded Kansas City, Missouri's debt rating, partially based on the economic benefits of Google Fiber being deployed in that city. We've been really pleased by the demand for the gigabit service. A key element of making it work for consumers is pricing. We charge $70 a month for a gigabit up and down with no volume caps, or $120 for a gigabit plus a really awesome TV service where everybody has a DVR, and over-the-top services like Netflix and Vudu are fully integrated, so you don't have to switch inputs and use different boxes to access content from the internet on your television. And to make sure that everyone can benefit and have an easy path to upgrade to a gigabit later, we offer a free product where if you pay $300 either one time or in 12 monthly payments, you get at least 7 years of 5 megabit internet for free, no recurring charge. And it's transferable with your home if you decide to sell it. This has been a powerful tool for addressing affordability, especially in apartment buildings where the owners of the units pay for the outfitting the building with fiber. This allows the owner to effectively bundle the free internet product as part of his rent, and the tenants never have to pay the construction charge. We're very pleased with this response, with the response we've gotten from apartment owners, and think this, along with connecting anchor institutions like schools and libraries at a gigabit for free, will help, at least in part, close some of the digital divide in Kansas City. Our build-to-demand process, where neighborhoods rally to hit sign-up targets to show us where to build, has also been very successful, with more than 90% of all fiber hoods hitting their targets, including the poorest neighborhoods in the whole state of Kansas. The fiber hoods that didn't make it in the first rally will get us a chance to try again in future rallies too, so we still hope to connect literally everybody up. The rally had an important side benefit too, because the citizens in these fiber hoods reached out to their neighbors and their friends and explained why they needed to be connected and how much they could benefit from a gigabit. And they did it much better than how we in Google could have. Understanding the value of being connected is critical to closing the adoption gap. And no one is better at communicating that kind of value than your friends and your neighbors. So we've been really pleased with how things are going in Kansas City, so much so that we're expanding to Austin, Texas, and have purchased the municipal fiber system in Provo, Utah, where we'll begin converting users next month. And we're not done yet. Drum roll, no. Others are acting too. Gigabit Squared is planning on deploying a gigabit fiber service in Seattle, and they're planning on offering a free tier of service just like we did. And Chattanooga, which has had gigabit service actually before Google Fiber was announced in Kansas City, said this week they were cutting the price of a gigabit to $70 a month. Utopia cut their price of a gigabit to $65 a month. And Longmont is now deploying ubiquitous affordable gigabit through their community. Getting affordable gigabit deployed in all these communities are great steps forward for America and for American broadband competitiveness. While we are proud of what we're doing with fiber at Google, we also want to say there is not just one answer for communities. There's just not one model that works. That's why we at Google actively oppose state and federal prohibitions on cities building networks. While we don't think this makes sense in every community, local leaders should have the option to build and live with the benefits and consequences of their decisions. Local officials are held to far higher standards of accountability than federal or state officials are. Prohibiting cities from the option to build is unwise and unnecessary. More choice and more competition are universally good, and that's what policy should aim to create. Which brings us back to what you can do to make affordable gigabit fiber happen in your community. The first is recognizing the problem and taking steps to convince city leadership that it's their problem and not someone else's. You know, a funny story, when I first got to Google, one of our senior executives had been talking to his city public works staff. They were in the process of deploying a large sewer system rebuild, and he wanted them to install conduit while they had the ground open so that fiber could be pulled later. We helped them out with specs and some design ideas, and he had a good plan in place. When the city manager returned from an extended vacation, he heard about the effort and immediately killed it. Why? Why would you do that? He said communications infrastructure wasn't their job. It was AT&T's. Literally, that's really what happened. They didn't feel like they needed to do anything. That city today doesn't even have cable service deployed in all of its areas, and its residents suffer from a lack of competition. And now, if anyone ever wants to go retrofit fiber there, it's going to be much more expensive than it could have been. So much so that maybe the economics will never work. That sort of attitude to telecom infrastructure has to change if cities are going to make progress. Next, we need to take steps to make rights-of-way easier to access and cheaper for new entrants to deploy fiber in them. If a city has conduit deployed through its streets, that's a real help in reducing cost and avoiding a lot of disruption by tearing the streets open again. Conduit should be deployed anytime the streets are open, especially if a large-scale water or sewer project upgrade is being performed. Utilities can do things that streamline processes too. When poles are being replaced in the normal course of business, they can add an extra foot of comm space dedicated to a future fiber build. Doing this on an ongoing basis every year that happens reduces the cost of doing make-ready in that community to add fiber. Making sure security audits are done and old obsolete wiring is removed prior to new network deployment is also a positive. One area where Washington has really failed is pole attachment. According to the FCC, telcos and cable operators have the right to attach to utility and telephone poles, but entities like us and others that only provide internet service don't. This discriminates against new entrants. Some cities and states have passed rules to assure every kind of provider can get access to the poles. You, as cities, can and should pass ordinances to provide access to poles by forcing utilities and telcos to allow attachment. Regulating use of public rights-of-way is an aspect of the local government's power to promote the health and welfare of its citizens. And cities may adopt reasonable conditions on rights-of-way that are aimed at minimizing disruption and hazards and promoting the availability of new services to its residents. Smyrna, Georgia requires users of its city-owned rights-of-way share access to their poles, conduits, and related facilities. If you want someone to build fiber in your city, whether it's Google or someone else, working to assure utilities and other providers can have access provided to their essential infrastructure, like poles, has to be on the top of mind for you. Has to be top of mind for you. Streamlining permitting and construction processes can be a big help. Partnering on rights-of-way by allowing providers to site equipment on city property can help reduce timeframes and constraints on deployment. You really want providers spending money on construction and not lawyers. Nothing wrong with lawyers, but they don't build fiber. Oftentimes, city leadership doesn't understand how these rather mundane and often boring issues affect costs so much. But they do add up to real savings when you're doing a large-scale build. As telecom officials in your communities, it's often up to you to explain why this is so important and why your city should act. There's no silver bullet. This is going to be a long-term process. But the sooner you start, the sooner things are going to change. And the best part about this is that you can take action and do it now. Not expecting Washington to fix the problem, actually quite empowering. It means that your community can also be advantaged over others by taking these steps. It's worth it. In conclusion, let me say that I think we're still in the early stages of the gigabit revolution. The first wave of broadband took us from kilobits to megabits. This new wave is going to take us from megabits to gigabits. And that revolution is going to be powered by fiber. Your community can have a gigabit future if you want it badly enough. If you really want to make it a reality. If you do, I'm pretty sure it will be worth the effort, just like it has been in Kansas City. We can help, but ultimately it's a choice your communities have to make, to take ownership, to not be satisfied with the status quo, to make sure your community leads and doesn't get left behind. That's what leadership is all about. Thank you.
Wherever you're comfortable.
Well, that's fine.
Yes, that is working. Thank you, Milo. And let me introduce you all to our two other panelists. Actually, they don't really need much of an introduction, I think, in this particular room. Rondella Hawkins from the city of Austin, a longtime NATOA member, former board member.
Thank you.
Longtime leader in our Texas chapter and someone who I think has worn every communications-related hat that a city can possibly offer, including most recently being a lead in the negotiations between the city of Austin and Google. And we look forward to hearing about your experiences. And then to my right, Chris Mitchell from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, someone who's been nationally recognized for the advocacy work, research, and writing he has done to educate the world about community broadband initiatives throughout the country and to advocate for community choice and local decision-making in broadband and communications. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
So let's start by asking Rondella and Chris to take a couple minutes to just introduce a little bit of their thoughts on this topic. Response to Milo and Rondella, hopefully you can share a little bit for us about what it felt like to be on the Austin side of the equation as between Google and a city. Can we ask you to start? Take a couple minutes.
Why certainly. I want to thank you for the invitation to speak. Austin is really excited to have Google Fiber come to town. We were really excited. Actually, being the second city chosen actually has benefits. There are a lot of lessons learned in Kansas as well as, so that was helpful. The community, whenever Google announced this request for information for the competition, they really rallied quickly. It only took a few days. And we had a community team together, and then we had a city team together to put together our application to demonstrate that there was a community demand that Austin was a city was very tech savvy, that would come up with some really great innovative applications that we are really good at doing large-scale infrastructure projects. We're growing, in case anybody hasn't heard, we have a lot. I think we have about 9 cranes in the downtown area. There's so much development activity. And we know it was important for speed, speed to market, speed to deployment, having an efficient process, permitting. We had a city team, so actually one of the outcomes of this project is that we have a lot more interdepartmental coordination. I think city departments are, this project touches almost all of the city departments, and now everyone's talking to one another, and we're like in many things, we take a look at our existing processes and see where there's opportunities for improvement. I think there's always room for improvement. We feel like we have a really good process when it comes to working with our telecom providers, but it's like the excitement is there's a lot of buzz. Everybody's really excited for the services to be deployed and start having the first customers.
Chris, reactions?
Well, I'm also very excited to be here. There's a lot of people, some people that have left Minnesota that I'm always glad to run into again. The Institute for Local Self-Reliance is a 40-year-old small nonprofit. For the past 8 years, we've been focused on municipal networks and cooperatives and other solutions that we think provide a long-term solution for bringing the connections that communities need at affordable prices, and making sure that they also don't do things that violate the open internet, as was discussed yesterday. We run a website called muninetworks.org, which comes highly recommended by me. Mostly because we spent most of the last 4 years working very hard on it, trying on a daily basis, writing about places like Longmont, places like Georgia where they're having these major fights, and working with Catherine in North Carolina. Just trying to cast a light on these things that don't get enough media attention, because there's people, all the people in this room need to know about these things that are happening. So we've been writing about it. We have an interactive map, over 400 communities that have built networks that are providing services to the private sector, 150 of them to everyone in the community. So we have a number of resources there. Regarding the presentation, just because there's a short time, I'm just going to focus on drawing out a piece that Milo didn't say, which I've heard you say in the past. And I want to just preface this by saying that I agree heartily with everything that Milo said. And what I'm about to say will sound like I'm disagreeing, but I actually don't. I think I'm calling for a conversation, which is that Milo has previously made a point that in the case of Kansas City, for instance, the teams never have to wait for an inspector, which I think is an important point. And as a person with some background in the private sector myself, I can appreciate the importance of not having to wait, having assets that are idle. Now, when you hear people like Time Warner Cable and AT&T, they say, oh, sure, we'll give that stuff to us too. And I think that there's a real cost of providing some of these services in the right of way. Many of them are valuable and should be done regardless of who the beneficiary is. It may help you to build your own network if that's where you decide to go. But it's important to note that there is a cost, and so the community should be getting something back from that, which is to say Google's gigabit as opposed to 10 megabit connection from Time Warner Cable. And so I think that we may decide as communities, many communities may decide that it is worth to pay a little bit extra in taxes or property taxes or other fees to cover the cost of expanding gigabit connections to everyone. But it's important to note that these things do have a cost, and the community should have the right to make sure it's negotiating for them and not just making these changes on the anticipation that someone's going to magically fly in because those changes have been made. It's a little bit convoluted, but I'm sure we're gonna address some of that. The other thing that I really wanted to note was that we see some really interesting pricing dynamics, as Milo noted. And the kind of competition you see in Kansas City is not the kind of competition we see in Seattle or St. Paul or Boston or Baltimore, many communities. And when you hear the people that live inside the Beltway, not the people in this room that live inside the Beltway, but a lot of the people inside the Beltway think that there's this thing called competition in Boston and St. Paul and Seattle. And there's not. There's slow DSL and slightly faster cable. We have a post going up tomorrow about Monticello, Minnesota, where there's 3 robust, fast networks that are fighting each other. And their prices are so much lower, it's crazy. You look at what's happening in Provo. There's very clearly something that happens when you have real competition as opposed to just the same old duopoly. And we see that in Chattanooga, where Chattanooga is just, as fast as they can hook people up, they're taking people away from Comcast. Because, and I don't mean to slam Comcast. I'm a Comcast customer, and they provide a very professional service to my neighborhood. But I would like more options to choose from and to see a little bit more of the competitive dynamic, because it's not what we're seeing in a lot of cities.
Thanks. Milo, picking up on Chris's point about the cost of some of the things that Google is advocating for on the part of local governments and that many of your partner cities have been very willing to do, what do you say to a community that says, oh, we would love to do these things, we'd love to have that local negotiation with you, Google, if you come to town, but if you guys don't come to town, we're a little bit worried that our phone company is going to want all of these things at our cost, and we're not going to see any new investment in the community, and we're just talking about public subsidy for that phone company?
Well, a few things. Many communities and states have rules that basically say you have to treat everybody exactly the same, whether they offer new services and new competition and disruptive products or not. And somebody once, I'm an engineer, so you'll have to excuse me if I get this wrong, but a lawyer once told me, he said, you know, it's discriminatory to treat the same people differently, but it's also discriminatory to treat different people the same. And I think, you know, you guys all have to live within the constraints of whatever systems you operate in. And so that requires, and these are different in different communities. Some communities may have the option through economic development to do something different. Others feel that they don't. I think, in general, things that make the government more efficient about processing things, making it easier to build in the community, with the stuff that Rondella talked about, is good for everybody. And, you know, it may be the case that maybe it only helps a CLEC pulling fiber through the downtown areas or in business districts end up allowing businesses in your community to get far lower charges for internet transport and private data services. I think anything that helps more competition and more providers come into your community is a good thing, because ultimately that's the vehicle where the foundation for information services. I think we've tried to work with a balance on recognizing what elements are easier and what elements are more complicated. We've tried to find ways within the kind of structures that each of the cities have to make things be fair and equitable. But ultimately, it's the community's decision about whether or not they think this kind of thing is worth it. I think, you know, I keep going back to my main point, which is, do you believe there's a problem? If you believe there's a problem, then you need to figure out what actions to take to help address that problem. And ultimately, we can be helpful in that process, but it's your process. You, the city, have to figure out what makes sense for your community, what knobs you have to turn, what options are available. If you have a municipal utility, you have a set of different options, as Austin does, than if you have an investor-owned utility. And not to say that IOUs are necessarily problems. We have great working relationship with Kansas City Power and Light. They're just fantastic to work with. But it does require a level of engagement that cities typically have deferred to others in the past. But that's how we got to where we are.
Rondella, what's happened in Austin in that regard? As Milo says, in some places you have to treat companies in the same way. Laws are different in different places, but have your incumbent carriers asked for some of the things that you as a city have partnered with Google on, given to Google in return for the pretty significant economic development build that is coming, and how's that played out?
Well, yes, in fact, back in April, on the day that we announced Google Fiber was coming to Austin, we had one of our other providers, AT&T, who made an announcement that they were going to build out a fiber to the home network. And they have approached us. We are discussions with them, and they are seeking, you know, equitable treatment. They want to see the expedited permitting, and you know, we are certainly willing to make those same arrangements with the incumbents in Austin. So we did get a reaction.
And if I may ask, imagine that, 2 fiber to the home networks in one city, announced on the same day. Give me just one moment to follow up on that question. When you say you're obviously willing to make the same commitments to AT&T that you have to Google, are you finding that AT&T is willing to make the same commitments to Austin that Google has made?
Well, we have not reached any final agreement per se, but we are in discussions. And I mean, with Google Fiber, this is, you know, a large scale. I mean, the magnitude of the deployment, and being, you know, having our own municipal-owned electric utility and owning 90% of the electric poles, we have, you know, I'd say a relatively quick make-ready permitting process for the pole attachments themselves. But yeah, AT&T, we will offer them similar treatment.
We look forward to hearing about it next year when you have a deal. Chris, please, I interrupted you, I'm sorry.
I hate to, I've seen a number of fiber to the press releases. I'm heartened to see that they're pulling permits, not my term, it's one that other smart people came up with. I'm heartened to see that AT&T is serious about making an investment, because the last words of those press releases said something along the lines of, notice to Wall Street, this will not materially change our investment plans. And I'd like to know how you do fiber to the home and a gigabit in Austin without materially changing your investment plans. I think it bears just repeating, my organization cares about scale. And we focus on municipal networks because they're small scale, they're resistant to things like NSA spying and whatnot, just because you're so scattered and small. You can't just put one tap in the West Coast and have access to all kinds of people's exchanges. There's so many benefits to things being local, but one of the benefits is you can make changes. And when you look at a company like CenturyLink, which is doing this project in West Omaha, a part of the Omaha metro area, it's great to see them investing in trying something new and seeing how it's going to work out so they can figure out how to fit it in. But these big companies have a lot of trouble changing their plans. They're massive companies that change very slowly. And so I just really want to echo what Milo said in terms of the future is communities and small scale and nimble entrepreneurs that are able to work within these locally.
Thanks. Milo brought up a really intriguing point in his presentation about the role that local governments can have around pole access. And we traditionally don't think of that as something that local governments can do, because in most communities the poles are owned by the phone company and the power company. It's a really intriguing idea that as an exercise of rights-of-way authority, it's lovely to hear a big company affirming that that authority exists and should be exercised, but as an exercise of rights-of-way authority, localities can help to make access available to new entrants on their poles. I'm hoping you can touch on that for a moment, and then I'd like to get the reactions of the other two.
Yeah, I think, you know, I don't think anybody questions the right that cities have to manage rights-of-way for the optimization of their community, to try and remove disruption, to allow new services and have them be delivered in your communities. And I think then the question goes to, well, what are the agreements that the communities have with the people who use its right-of-way? Certainly, our agreements with cities have gotten a lot of attention, but utilities also have agreements with cities. Telephone companies also have agreements with cities. And so the question is, how are those assets being used to make it easier, to require fewer road closures when you have to cut the street open, to require less make-ready work, less disruption? I think communities have fundamental rights over their rights-of-way, being able to use them to empower new providers to deliver services, and to empower, by the way, incumbents to upgrade their networks if they ever wanted to do that.
I think these are all really good things. And so I think we think cities should act in this way, and we stand by to support them when they do so. Because I think it's important not just for entities like us, but we have tons of lawyers in Google, but there are a lot of providers who don't. They don't deploy fiber, which is why there's a lawyer to engineer ratio that's rigorously enforced. But I think if you think about the resources of smaller companies trying to go build or cities trying to go build, removing these barriers for others is just as important, if not more so, than for companies like ours.
And Google has started talking quite a bit publicly in recent weeks about these pole access issues. I assume you're having the experience, or let me put that as a question. Can you tell us about the experience you're having with the pole attachments as something that's integral, and pole access is integral to building the network? It seems to have become a bigger and bigger issue, and it's, I think, a good learning experience in terms of what the needs are. I'm sorry, was it not evident who that question was for?
To me or to Rondella?
I'm still you.
Okay.
That's okay. Thanks.
Yeah, so I think we've worked with a number of communities and have gotten pole attachment rights in areas where we build. We've managed to work out solutions in Provo, which was existing network, but also had CenturyLink poles in them. We have agreements with AT&T in the Kansas City, parts of the Kansas City area. So I think there's this wide range of solutions. Things don't have to be controversial. At the same time, I think you have to recognize that there's a fundamental issue of equity when one class of provider cannot get on a pole. It affects the economics of being able to go build in these areas. And I think that's a real problem. By the way, it's true whether it's us or, as I said, anyone who's offering a pure IP platform.
Rondella, can you talk a bit about the Austin experience on the pole issue? You're a municipal electric utility. So smooth the way.
The other pole owner is AT&T, but again, Austin does own the majority of the poles, and we manage the access issue. That's really deferred to between the pole owner and the attachee.
Chris, thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of think that any community that's not built on a swamp or bedrock granite should be really thinking about conduit. In our tour of Longmont, we saw these areas that all the utilities have been undergrounded. In Fort Collins, everything had been undergrounded. And it's not just more attractive, but when you have a lot of conduit, I think there's more ability for competition. If I was building a single network, I'd want to be on the poles. It's cheaper, it's easier, it's faster, it's all that. But if you want to have a choice of 4 or 5 providers at some point in the future, if the market ever supports different kind of niche providers and the idea of having real robust choices, I don't think it's going to be on the poles. And to some extent, a question that I've been rolling around in my head for a while was, if I just ignore the next 5 years and I ran a city, and I just say, I'm going to do something today that's going to benefit me starting in 5 years and moving on, what would it be? And it would be to try to get rid of scarcity of fiber. I'd be trying to get fiber into every neighborhood, make it easier for conduit within the neighborhoods. And the thing is if you can get a lot of conduit in the ground and you only use, I'm going to just throw out a number of 25% of it, you've probably saved yourself a whole heck of a lot of money, even if you are abandoning a fair amount of the conduit you put in, because it's such a benefit. And so I think to some extent there's a question that either Milo, you or Blair say this, which is, for a lot of us, if you look at the network we have today, that's the network we're going to have in 5 years. Unless something changes dramatically, unexpectedly, in St. Paul, I'm going to be using Comcast in 5 years because they're still going to be the best game in town. And I think cities should be recognizing that and figuring out how to just bring in more fiber and lease it out, give it away, do whatever the local community decides, but try to get rid of scarcity.
I would just say on that point, the incremental cost of adding conduit, even multiple conduits and handholds, if you're already opening the ground for other reasons, is really very, very, very small. So I think that the challenge is this issue about intentionality and coherence. Can you get all parts of the city to look at actions that they're taking that could make it easier for someone to build or harder, and to align them in a way that makes it easier for new networks and new competition to come to your community? And conduit is one of these things, pole attachment is another. There's a whole host of these items. And so I think it's really, when you start embracing the principle first, in your community, you'll start seeing all kinds of things that you can do. And again, this is not necessarily things that cost a lot of money. They may just be process improvements in making your city run more efficiently. A lot of communities have never thought about what it would take to do permitting for a large-scale project like this, because incumbents don't come to you with saying, hey, I need to go do upgrades in this area, right? So if nobody's ever come to you with that, you don't tend to optimize your processes for it. But at the same time, you wouldn't use the same rules to permit an auto plant that you would use to permit a Taco Bell, right? And so there's a level of scale that you have to think through when you deal with these kind of large projects where you may have thousands of miles of fiber being installed.
I want to invite you all to come to the microphones. There are 2 out there on the floor, and feel free. And while we're waiting for everyone to line up, I will say, Milo, why don't you share with us what Google Fiber's expansion plans are? What's next?
Well, that was quick. I would say, I think when we announced Austin, I think I said something along the lines of, it's still the beginning. And I would say it's probably no longer the beginning, but it's also no longer the end. It's also not the start of the end.
Okay.
A very long end.
Room for more.
David Olson, please.
Hi, David Olson from Portland, Oregon, a city shattered by brewing a microbrew branded as Gigabit IPA. We somehow could not attract you to our city, and I have it on good authority that anyone presenting themselves at our transportation department office with a business card identifying themselves as Milo Medin will receive a right-of-way permit and a chilled bottle of Gigabit IPA on site and immediately. I just want you to know that. Having said that, I'm interested in some of the factors that would allow a city or a region to be gigabit ready. And that is not only single point of contact for right-of-way, permit turnaround, attentiveness. We're a little concerned. We have the handicap of having only IOUs, investor-owned utilities, as we don't have a municipal electric. It is a handicap, but on the other hand, we work with everyone to make sure everything gets done. And the question really is the lack of a municipal owned electric infrastructure going to be an insuperable handicap, and we still have Gigabit IPA for you. Just want you to know that. Wondering.
I'll tell you a funny story before I answer your question, since you asked about the business card. I remember one of our employees checked into a hotel in a particular market we were working on. I won't get into the specifics. And they said, oh, you work for Google? Yes. He says, oh, yeah, we got a call. The cable operator wanted to know when any one of you guys checked in. And I was like, really? I was like, oh, interesting. Go figure. So I would say there are a number of factors on right-of-way. Part of it is, utilities do play a critical role. Kansas City Power and Light has been a great partner of ours, and I think part of the issue is...
And they're privately owned, right?
And they're privately owned. And I think, it was interesting, the CEO at the time made a comment. He said, he didn't really know what to do with us until he talked to his son, who's, I think, 26, and he said, Dad, it's a gigabit. You got to do it. And he said, well, what's it? Dad, it's a gigabit. You have to make this happen. And so I think part of this is an understanding, most of the utilities are really integral parts of their community. KCPL certainly is in Kansas City. And their leadership is not divorced from the kind of aspirations and the desires and the the impact of economic expansion in these areas. So I think part of this just it requires senior level visibility, and not just going to the guy who normally deals with the certification verification for somebody wanting to get on a pole in a particular area. You really have to start at the top. And I think if you've got that buy-in there, then you can have a really great working relationship. And I think we do that with the utilities. I would say, with KCPL, I would say also one of the things that you should be doing with your utilities is advocating for, in the normal process of pole replacement, which I think generally poles are replaced once every 10 years or so, just for normal maintenance. Adding a foot of comm space dedicated for fiber on the pole, doing that ahead of time. If you think about what that means, right? A span of 5 years with literally almost no cost, right? You will now have dedicated bolts on all those on half your infrastructure without having to do make ready, right? So these are things that, it's not going to solve the problem tomorrow. But if you take measures like this, you can make your city much more advantaged to be able to deploy fiber quicker. And I would say also just communities, it's really about coherence and leadership. Sure, we talk about rights of way, but it's also about, can your schools take advantage of a gigabit? What are they thinking about in terms of infrastructure, right? There's a wide variety of schools in Kansas City, right? We come to some and they know exactly what to do with it. Others are trying, we need I guess our firewall is 10 years old and it doesn't have a gigabit connector on it, right? So there are things like that that have to be thought through in an integrated way.
A lot of the communities in the room have actually had challenges getting onto poles themselves. Most of them are not pole owners. And a lot of the time our working assumption about it is because they are seen as competition by the phone company owners of the poles.
I'm shocked.
I'm wondering about your experience with that, though, and how Google's navigated that, because you are pretty profound competition for the phone company pole owners.
Yeah, it's complicated. I think we have relationships with many of these entities in different contexts. But I think ultimately you have to ask yourself, let's step back and say, why would somebody allow a competitor to get on their infrastructure, even though it's essential in the community, even though they're in the community's right of way, when they don't have to? I mean, this is just, so there's a give and take here, but I think a part of the dynamic is, I might have certain levers that I can pull as part of Google, but what if you're XYZ FiberCo wanting to go pull that up? What are the odds? We had to do all kinds of crazy things to get some of our telco pole attachment deals done, which made our lawyers work really hard. It's not what a country who is serious about deploying fiber would ever tolerate. It's just, it's just the way it is. I would argue, by the way, the point I'm making is we're not serious as a country about deploying fiber. I don't think anybody would argue about that.
Thanks. Mitzi?
Hi, Mitzi Herrera from Montgomery County, Maryland. Thank you very much for coming. I just quickly want to toss out there, and Joe Van Eaton might remember the name of the community. At least 10 years ago, I worked on a case in which a community required that new entrants coming in and putting things in the right-of-way install extra conduit, and that provision was overturned because the courts held that you had not required the initial entrance into the right-of-way to have that same requirement. So one is, from a legal standpoint, it's not as easy as just enacting the requirement. The point you just made about the pole attachments, I really ask and hope that you and Google make those points strongly at the FCC and at the state public service commissions, because for most communities, those poles are not the purview of the localities. We have just as much trouble getting on there. And a lot of times when they lump in and talk about right-of-way costs, they sort of talk about it as a local barrier when in fact there either is a gap in the federal pole attachment rules or at the state level, and having a competitive business provider like Google make that point makes it so much stronger. But what I wanted to ask you about is, we have in Montgomery County, we have an urban area, we have a rural area. We have about 2,500 homes that are spread out over a 110-mile agricultural reserve. And so I've been spending a lot of time looking at your different models for when the prices that, if for people who don't know about it, when Google comes into a community, you don't have a requirement typically to have to build the whole community, and you kind of have these big days that you get people to sign up, and lots of advertisement and things like that. And then based on if you get enough people to sign up and you can make a business model, then you'll do it. So could you talk a little bit about the dynamics of what that tipping point is? Because what we're trying to do is to move to, we have a renewal with Comcast happening, and we're trying to go from, instead of require them to just build everywhere, is that if people do say they want to sign up, that they will deeply subsidize the cost to get out there. So can you just talk a little bit more in depth about what goes into Google's decision as to when to build in a community? Do you have any kind of hard and fast ideas about when the scale tips in favor of doing it? And what are the long-term things that for you make it, in your mind, make a good business case for putting that upfront investment in there and basically covering those costs?
Mm-hmm. So let me just start with a couple just kind of foundational points. If you were willing to give me a monopoly on all internet service in the community, I'd build universally without any rally, no trouble. Cable operators had monopolies on video service when they first built, and telcos had monopolies on voice service when they first built. And nobody seems to want to give out monopolies anymore. So, it's, I guess, who's standing.
We are prohibited by law from granting those.
I'm totally fine with that too, by the way. So I think that the challenge of, there's always been this kind of sense of, well, if you want to go, if I give you an exclusive right where no one else has it, then you can now subsidize one area from the other. But when you don't have any of those exclusives anymore, where all you're offering a new service, but you're competing in a market with incumbents who had the monopoly to justify their initial CapEx build, have all the customers, right? It's a difficult challenge to how you make the economics of a fiber build work, period, much less a gigabit build. So I would say part of what we've done has been trying to, again, work with communities to lower the cost, so that lowers the threshold that you need to go construct in an area. And then I think, can we create a differentiated product, which is vastly better than what you can get, so that people would sign up? For fiber builds and fiber to the node builds that incumbents have done, they don't build universally either, right? But what we've done is we've made that process transparent. Rather than us trying to figure out where demand exists, we leave it up to the community. So literally the community decides, right? Any community that hits the threshold target would get fiber built in that area. And we aim for mass market, right? As I said, 90% of the first build area hit their qualification. We set that threshold based by the cost of building. So if you're in a really nice area, large lots, everything underground, so it's all pretty, right?
And expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive. We set a 25% target in Kansas City. In other areas which were much denser, all aerial construction, higher density, much smaller lot sizes, some of those were targeted at 5%. So I think that the challenge is when you don't have an infrastructure anymore, you can't play the exclusive franchise game anymore. How do you fundamentally make the economics of these areas work is really important. I think if you had an area where, even with the kind of densities you're talking about, and you could get 100% sign-up rate, well, maybe that would actually make the economics work even in that area without some form of subsidy. I'd have to look at the specifics. But I think obviously your take rates are really important with regards to economic return over a period of time. And I think our build-to-demand model is a model that works in the world where there are no more exclusive franchises, and you have to operate in a competitive environment where incumbents have literally all the customers already. So that's what we've been trying to do, and we think we will learn from that, and we'll get better at this over time. I hope it's a model that other communities can learn from about what works and what doesn't. One thing about the law, prohibiting learning is really a bad idea. If you did something before, and well, that's kind of you realize it wasn't such a smart idea, and the law says you're never allowed to learn, that's really a problem, right? And of course, it's easy for an engineer to speak like that. So I think part of this is what kind of arguments are made, and what's the logic that's being advocated here. And I think sometimes it may require in your state, it might require the state legislature taking action. I think that's great. States are empowered too.
Thank you.
Chris, do you want to comment on the build-out models?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, there's the downside of all of us being the center of where the action is, which is that we have a fundamental abdication at the federal level of the idea that everyone should have roughly fair access to some sort of communication system. Instead, we have the policy of some people will have incredibly fast and affordable, some people will have slow and affordable, some people will have slow and unaffordable, and it just sort of will end up in this other area. I think city governments, local governments, counties still have this fundamental ideal of wanting to serve everyone. And to some extent, this is where putting in your own assets gives you a tool to negotiate and to try and provide a tool. So you may say, look, we're going to cut down your costs in these dense areas, but if you want access to that, you have to commit to build out these other areas. It's a matter of building up some leverage over time, and some of that can be done at a low cost. In the past, I think, my work has been perceived as this idea that every city should run out and build a fiber-to-the-home network immediately. And I'm trying to be much more clear now that that's not what we're saying. That there's a continuum of action, that it starts at doing nothing and hoping that someone else will come in and doing it, to doing what Chattanooga has done. Not every community has the assets of Chattanooga or not just an electric utility, but an incredibly well-run electrical utility. There's a difference to some extent. And so in between that continuum, though, there's things like getting fiber in the ground. There's getting conduit in the ground, which are two different things. There's starting to serve some local businesses, starting to serve schools and libraries, as Montgomery County has done a terrific job of doing. And some communities have taken that step, and they move down the continuum, and others have found ways that they don't have to. But you have to get some assets to have the leverage to try and make sure that everyone in your community is covered, because CAF isn't going to cut it. The Connect America Fund that the Universal Service has spiraled into, I don't think it's a very good solution for actually making sure that all of America has the technology we need to be what Jim Ballard would call, if he was in the room, a great nation, which I think is a great piece of rhetoric.
Those of us in the room, can you raise your hand if your community is somewhere on that continuum that Chris just described, taking some steps toward either municipal or public-private partnerships? Okay, thanks. Question from Jody.
I was just wondering if you could give us some examples of some of the applications or the great ideas. I know you mentioned the startups in Kansas City, but some of the really exciting things, ideas, or things that are actually starting to happen. I know, Chris, you have your finger on the pulse all over the country, and Rondella, if anything has been talked about in Austin of things, projects and adoption and things that are happening because of the fiber.
Why don't you go first?
Well, sure. So, we received some really great ideas. One, Austin is trying to become more of a film industry, and rather than having folks have to go to LA to do video editing for films, it's like, wouldn't it be great if you could do film editing, or online music festivals or online film festivals, streaming music from the local venues. We've got a medical center that is being built, and so there's a lot of applications. As far as telemedicine, So those are just a few. I mean, and again, we don't know what the innovative applications are. That's what's so exciting.
I would say, you know, it's still early days because part of this is you need scale. Two things I would point out. In the first broadband revolution, the target was the one computer at the home. And today, we have enough networks now, and we do a lot of work in device design to try and make Wi-Fi work really well throughout the home, for example. But it may not be that there's one app that needs a gig. It may be that there are 10 devices all wanting to use 100 megabits, right? And that without bumping into each other, right? We've had conversations about people who have had this problem where someone would start Netflix up and one kid was playing a PS3 game and all of a sudden he'd start getting killed, right? Because the contention on the link. By the way, that's a really bad thing to happen when your kids are fighting over that. So I think just creating that kind of headroom is important. The fact that the upstream is just as fast as the downstream in the system is a huge differentiator. In some cases, you could have it literally 1,000 times faster than what people had before. And we've seen things where businesses have actually moved because there was one example of a sports photo business where they would actually get digital media in and then upload them to be processed, right? But they couldn't upload them fast enough, so they literally FedEx them. Now they can actually use the network to go do that. KU Med Center is working on some things with regards to telemedicine because now you've got enough reverse that you can actually have a high definition video conference, be able to get multiple sensors as well as just a kind of a basic image. So I think still early days. The fact that you can have such a high peak to average ratio is to say when you may not download a large file, a large movie, a Linux distribution, et cetera, very often, but when you do, it happens immediately. You don't have to wait 3 hours for it to happen. It's a big productivity boost in sectors that need that kind of access. And so we've seen that. Plus the ability to get to the cloud really quickly. Most of the folks who are working in Startup Village are not building things that run on in their own areas in Kansas City, but they're interacting with either Amazon or Google's cloud infrastructure, and the ability to go back and forth so quickly with such low latency and high speed allows them to develop software that runs in the cloud much faster. And so there's a lot of productivity improvements that come in those areas.
I'm excited about a ton of things, but for this audience, I think about some of the public access and people creating videos and stuff like that. You know, we often hear with a gig, you could download a movie in 15 minutes rather than 2 hours. Well, it still takes me 2 hours to watch the movie, so it's not all that compelling to me. But I was just talking with Vince this morning from our Community Broadband Network of the Year in Longmont, you know, talking about the feedback that they've gotten because the utility and people on the ground there are doing a much better job of covering the floods and the disaster than CNN is, right? I'm just going to steal Vince's words directly and talk about, you know, CNN's there for 3 minutes on a street corner. They show you a little bit. Maybe they have some people doing a few minutes of iReport. They put hours of footage up. So people that care about it can actually go through it. They can see aerial footage and go all this other stuff. Well, now it makes sense to me, right? If I can download that in a few seconds, I can start scrolling through it. I can look for the things that interest me. I can, if I create something like that, I can have it up in a second. I don't have to start uploading it and then wander away and get distracted and forget what I was doing and this and that. There's a lot of things that I think will change, and this is why the gigabit is important. And I like to say it's not because it's 1,000 megabits per second. It's not that we're going to max out a gigabit, which, by the way, if you're going to max out a gigabit, if you want a gigabit application, you need to build a 10 gigabit network. That's the way networks work. So stop looking for the gigabit app. Let's look for the slower apps. The engineer can explain that if anyone wants to follow up with it. But the point is that the gigabit is that it's this idea that you're not waiting for the network. You want to do what you want to do, you get it done. And the ability, I think, to do that will change the way we use media. And we see a ton of people that want to create their own media and share it. And I think this can revolutionize that. To some extent, I think the question for people in this room, I don't know nearly as much about PEG as people seeing these tables, is how to make sure these access centers are available to people and they can get the training that they need and make sure that they're state open and funded and that sort of thing. So we don't have a whole bunch of hacks out there.
Jerry, question.
Sure. First, I think on behalf of a lot of us, I want to thank you, Milo, for putting the whole idea of fiber on the front page so we could explain to our kids that what we do really is hip. You know, it's made life a little easier that way. Huh?
Yeah.
Actually, could I ask two questions? One, could you tell us what the business plan for Google Fiber is? Is it to be successful as a fiber provider, or is it to be successful as being able to push more content over the fiber, and that's where the payoff is? And if you encourage others to build out fiber, which you clearly have done, then that's even a lot more pipes that you can push more things over faster, and that's a terrific business plan. So that would be one question. And the other question I would have is that I think your description is very fair about the difficulty in getting on the poles. There is a statutory protection for telephone companies or Title II providers, and there's a statutory protection for Title VI providers. And so if the DC Circuit were to overturn the FCC's decision on net neutrality and the commission were to go back and re-examine that, would Google contemplate being supportive of IP networks, fiber networks being classified as Title II or Title VI, because then you would be guaranteed access?
That's a lot of, that's a talk of a dynamic range. Yeah, the first question I would say, you know, my P&L is driven by subscriber revenues. Other parts of Google benefit from having fast networks, but I don't actually get credit for that. Poor me. Yeah, I have to actually make the economics work purely on the access business, and actually I think you can. I think that, you know, again, there's a lot of misconceptions about how much bandwidth costs and the rest. Really helps to have scale. And I think if you look at the products we offer, our goal is to actually make money, at least my P&L goal is purely on the access side. You asked a question about, well, wouldn't you, you know, if the DC Circuit overturns the FCC's open internet order, will we be in favor of applying Title II or Title VI regulation on internet traffic? That seems to be like lobbing a nuclear warhead at a fly, right? If you want to go get other non-Title II, Title VI cable operator, right? It's not just Title VI, it's cable operators. If you want other entities to have access on the poles, just pass a rule that allows them. Why convolve the entire process of how the internet works, how interconnection works in the internet, and how all that, which generally works pretty well, why get all that stirred up to deal with a relatively small issue? So I think, you know, I think the commission has the ability to go address this. They did a pull attachment proceeding in 2011, decided not to address this issue at that time. So, you know, I think states and cities now have the ability to take actions in this space because the feds aren't doing it. And so I think you should do it. I don't think you need to go apply all the common carrier stuff to all the internet space in order to solve a relatively narrow pull attachment thing.
This will be our final question. Go ahead.
Thanks, Joanne. David Zelenak from a place I'm sure nobody's ever heard of, Centennial, Colorado. Just by way of bragging rights, we're the largest city ever founded in the nation's history. We're only 10 years old, brand new city in the metro Denver area, a little over 100,000 population. And I was kind of intrigued by your comment about the Public Works Director. I happen to have been a couple of times now Public Works Director, and we changed our rules about a year ago in Centennial, requiring not open access, but requiring all permits done by power companies, the gas companies, whomever is coming in to do boring, allow us to do a piggyback, is what we call it. Their cost is $15 to $20 per board foot. our cost is about 90 cents to piggyback. And just this year alone, we've gotten 115,000 feet of conduit throughout Centennial. We've got 50 miles now of stuff that we're not quite sure what to do with. So well, with that said, from our perspective, we're a big city, we're a well-educated town. How do we get on your map? How do we start the dialogue going?
Yes. Does the hotel in your city talk to no. First off, I would just meta point. We're totally happy for cities to piggyback on our fiber builds. You will not get any hassle from that. In fact, Kansas City, Missouri has taken advantage of that in some parts of the city. So we have no trouble with that, and not pro rata cost, but incremental cost, because we were going to go build the conduit to pull through anyway. So I think that's totally reasonable, good policy, and we live by that as well. I think we talked to many cities because of the kind of incumbent reactions. We find it better for everybody not to talk about things publicly until the deals are done, and then we'll talk about them. So my email address is medin@google.com, right? So. I know you're standing up for another city that actually wanted to answer the question.
Yeah. I certainly wouldn't want to talk to you publicly, but thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And I actually just got a note that we have a few more minutes. That's a first. Okay, that's great. Thanks. Let me ask you, Chris, on this topic of finding a partner. We just saw a great dynamic in terms of a city trying to attract interest from Google, and I expect multiple people will approach you after the session, Milo. But Chris, any thoughts for a community that would like to see something like this happen, other than Google, which is something we've discussed here today? Any thoughts on how would you go about thinking about finding a partner, and who is out there? Is anyone out there?
Just about every community that we know of that's built its own network or partnered with others started by trying to work with the incumbent providers. They're there. It's the path of least resistance. It's this first step you take, which is to say, go to your incumbent telephone and cable company and say, like if you have businesses that are complaining or residents that are unsatisfied, you take some of the complaints and give them an opportunity to address them. In many cases, again, I think because of their size, their scale, the difficulty of running a bureaucracy of that size, we found large incumbents to be generally unresponsive to that sort of thing. Then a number of communities will start looking, and sometimes they know of someone. So in Indianola, south of Des Moines, a city, they knew of a nearby provider that had a good reputation, and they partnered with them. Other cities have done an RFP, and they've been surprised to find that there's a small private company nearby that was interested in checking it out. I mean, I spoke with our friend, I've forgotten your name, John from Alaska, from Seattle, built a network in Alaska about interest in potentially partnering with places in Washington. There's small firms like this that I think have a business model that may have in the past been they resold DSL from a large telephone company. That business model is being killed slowly but surely between federal decisions and the reluctance of a telephone company to help its competitors. So they're looking in many cases to try and find a secure way. And so if they can find a good partner, that's a good place to go. And I would say that when you're going down this road, you really need to talk to others. I mean, Vince is very good about answering the phone. Kyle Hollifield's here. He's helped many communities. In the Washington Post story yesterday about Chattanooga, they're doing a ton of consulting with other communities now to answer questions. So I think you want to come to someone like me or a city. Now, if you come to me, I'm going to give you a few words of advice, and I'm going to try and find a good city for you to go to ask for advice, because they've been there and they've done that. And I think this horizontal learning is the most important part of feeling secure and moving forward in a strong way.
Rondella, had the city of Austin, sorry, not heard. Had the city of Austin spoken with its incumbent providers in the past about new networks or upgrades?
Well, we did not speak with the incumbents, but this was back in the 90s where the city actually was going to partner with a private entity to build an open access fiber network because we thought that was a really good right-of-way management practice and it would encourage competition. And however, that project was killed by the legislature. So since that time, we've got the incumbents. There's not been a lot of conversation, but Austin fortunately has been a test market for some of Time Warner Cable's their advanced services. Roadrunner was one of, I think, the first test sites besides, I think, Orlando. So we have benefited.
I think they tried to do usage-sensitive billing and volume caps in
metered
Austin
billing.
as well.
Yes,
metered billing too.
Yes, they were going. Time Warner was one of the operators was going to introduce the metered billing, and we have. I think it's it's helpful to know that we have a commission, a Citizen Advisory Commission, and they really stay apprised of a lot of the policy issues, and it helps to have this community conversation, and so that became an issue of a couple of agendas that I can recall, and there was pushback, and the company did not initiate the metered billing.
Can I say one other thing?
Please.
Just spoke in my head. I mean, sitting next to you in your NATOA capacity reminded me also that there are consultants you can deal with. And I just wanted to say that we've seen some communities have just terrific experience with consultants, and we've seen some cities that have been dissatisfied, or later it appeared they didn't get very good advice. I think the number one thing to do in evaluating a consultant to help you out is to look at their past clients and to talk to them and to get a sense of how they worked with them. And when things changed, because these projects are very complicated and things change, how did they roll with it, and were they supportive, and did they come to a solution? Because as more and more cities are doing this, which we're seeing now, we're going to see more consultants coming in, and some of them are not going to be very good at this. And so it's really important to check out their work experience, not just that they have a really cool resume they list a whole bunch of networks, but to call on those and see how they worked with those communities.
Picking up on the point about metered billing and data caps, this is a really interesting one. We've got about a minute and a half left. Milo and Chris, would you comment on Rondella's point about that and how those things might happen in your network, Milo?
Yeah, we don't do metered billing or volume caps. At a gigabit, you can burn through most of everybody's normal caps pretty quickly anyway. I think the challenge is network cost is driven by peak hour load. Off-peak, it costs you nothing, but maybe a few photons to push the bits through the network. So having a usage cap which says, I'm going to push, you're limited in terms of how much volume you push on a monthly basis, is totally decoupled from the cost and engineering of a network. It just is. And I think even NCTA has basically said, yeah, it's not about congestion control, it's about revenue maximization, which is totally correct. We view this as an area to differentiate. And Time Warner today in Kansas City does not have volume caps. I suppose they could change that, but they might not in Kansas City. And so I think we just don't see it as helping from congestion management or congestion control perspective. It's not about congestion.
It's really helpful in terms of dissuading any potential competitors that are doing over-the-top video. Comcast helpfully has a bandwidth meter that I check periodically. I don't do any sort of file trading or BitTorrent type stuff. I've left that all long behind, long past the statute of limitations. And I look at what my wife and I use, no children in the household. I'm a pretty tech kind of geeky guy. 175 to 200 gigabytes per month reliably. I would guess the majority of it is Netflix and a fair amount of data backup into the cloud. That is without any kids. The people I know that have kids blow right by us because those kids are often streaming on 2 or 3 devices at the same time. And so bandwidth caps are a problem that we're going to hit really fast. I mean, the bandwidth caps have been set at 250 gigabytes in many cases, and we're like, whoa, that's so far away. And 3 years later, the bandwidth cap is still at 250 gigabytes per month, and it's pretty worrisome. And pretty much the only logical reason one can come up with for having that sort of a cap, because as the economics are, as Milo described them, is to try and discourage people from using their connection. And I think that's a threat to a lot of innovation on the internet.
Okay, we are out of time. Don't get up, because we have one more Community Broadband Award to give, and I want to ask Tony to come up, but please join me in thanking our panel. We're very grateful.
Should we get up or just sit here?
Okay, while we're waiting to get our Skype connection put together, we're going to have the drawing for the Passport Awards. The first winner is going to win a package of 12 Enatoas for next year. And please be a name I can pronounce. Yay. Jonathan Alexander from the city of Hyattsville. Isn't he a new member? And our final drawing is for the 2014 annual conference registration. And the winner is, I'm not looking, Dennis Rafferty from NDC4. I would if I knew. September 29th through October 3rd, 2014 in St. Paul / Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Is Dennis here? He has to be present. Dennis?
Was he here at lunch? Was he? Oh, I say we get yeah. Okay. And is the Skype all set up? Good.
As we mentioned earlier, we have one final Community Broadband Award, and this award is for championing the effective use of technology in the nation's 4th largest school district, promoting digital literacy, and combating the digital divide. This year's Community Broadband Visionary of the Year award goes to Alberto Carvalho, Superintendent of the Miami-Dade School District. Alberto, are you there?
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Yes. It is a pleasure to be able to connect with you from a distance. But since I am getting this this award recognizing, being a visionary in dealing with broadband and benefits to the community, it is appropriate for me to connect with you via Skype. So let me first and foremost accept this award on behalf of the students and staff of Miami-Dade County Public Schools, as well as the many community organizations and donors who have supported truly our efforts to bring computer and broadband access to all of our students. I'm a true believer that in a hyper-connected society, the digitally disconnected is at a considerable educational and long-term economic disadvantage. So I'd like to thank the Board of Directors at the National Association of Telecommunication Officers and Advisors for presenting me and my team, my school system, with this Community Broadband Visionary of the Year award. I can tell you that here in Miami-Dade, and I believe this is now a moral imperative across the country, we must be committed to providing all students with a 21st century learning environment. We are in a process of building a comprehensive information technology infrastructure. In the process, I really hope to eradicate the digital deserts in our community by working toward broadband equity. In a process, I believe we are ensuring that every student and his or her family have access to the internet. This is a 21st century right, in my opinion. We're providing advanced level technology in every classroom in our school system. But to do that, you have to be daring and you have to demonstrate some degree of leadership. But you have to be bold, notwithstanding the economic conditions in our community. So we did pass a massive $1.2 billion bond referendum at the height of the recession in an environment that was very much anti-tax. But I can tell you that results will drive political processes. And 70% of the people in Miami-Dade did approve this bond referendum because they believed in the results and they believed in a mission that we embody. Secondly, we've pumped in about $63 million into a one-to-one initiative in Miami-Dade. We will lead not with devices, but with digital content. We'll provide district-wide wireless access in 21st century classrooms. And equally important for a lot of folks who are concerned about young men and women and the teachers who lead them in terms of their access to digital content and internet resources, we are currently implementing a very liberal BYOD policy. The time is here, the time is now for us to move ahead with a brand new infrastructure for American public education. Digital content and access to digital resources is a must, no longer an option in our community. So in closing the digital divide, I can tell you that we are eliminating, literally, the digital deserts. They are often pockmarked across the community by virtue of zip codes alone. And I recognize that digital convergence is and must be the portal through which our students will access information, stimulate inquiry, and cultivate knowledge in the new age of education. This is the age of convergence, and I am eternally grateful for your recognition. That goes beyond me. It's a recognition of the work and the mission that we have embraced here in Miami-Dade. So once again, thank you very much. I congratulate all of you for the support as key members of our community and our society, your support of the transformation of education through digital equity. Thank you.
And that concludes our awards ceremony and lunch.